Hello, everyone, and welcome to PCR's April Tips and Virtual Transition Times meeting. My name is Melissa Wyman, and I am PCR's Respite Care and Community Engagement Director. I will be your moderator this evening, so please feel free to send any questions or comments in the chat box below. We are so excited to be collaborating with Montgomery County Public School Transition Services Unit to provide an enhanced transition times program for transitioning youth, their families, and caregivers. We are delighted to offer this presentation with American Sign Language simultaneous interpretation. We will also be offering this presentation with Spanish simultaneous interpretation and Amharic simultaneous interpretation. To access the other interpretation services in Amharic and Spanish, at the bottom of your screen, select Interpretation, select Spanish for the Spanish interpretation, and Chinese for the Amharic interpretation. Mute original audio if you only want to hear one language. The English and Spanish language versions will be archived on the PCR website Transition Times page. Just some Zoom tip reminders. We are using the webinar platform. We will wait for questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to submit any of your questions in the chat box below. Also, click Show Captions to see the captions for the webinar. You must select the speaking language you would like to show. Lastly, for funding needs, it's very important to receive feedback from our attendees. Please answer the one question poll by the end of the webinar. Thank you for your help and feedback. We are so excited tonight to have two incredible presenters to talk about doors and Social Security. Our first presenter of the night is Valerie Pridgeon, Transition Rehabilitation Specialist from Montgomery County. And then we will finish the night with the Social Security guru, Michael Dalto from High Note Consulting. Valerie?
So I will be presenting in Valerie's place. She's just here.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. All right.
So
Let me spotlight you for everybody. All right. Perfect.
So just for clarity, Valerie Pridgeon is the transition unit supervisor, and I'm a transition counselor or VR counselor, or
Okay.
however you
Thank
want to
you.
call it. So my name is Taylor Price. I'm a vocational rehabilitation specialist with the State of Maryland Division of Rehabilitation Services. And we are an agency that help people with disabilities get training and support that leads to permanent competitive employment. So the agenda will go over what DOORS is, which is pretty much what I just said. We'll go over pre-employment transition services, which is PREATS. We'll introduce employment services, and then general information about DOORS. So again, DOORS is a state agency that offers training and programs for people with disabilities to get access to jobs. And there are two different programs. We have pre-employment transition services and then employment services for students and non-students as well. People have access to DOORS throughout the entire state of Maryland, not just in Montgomery County. There's Prince George's County, Hartford County, Baltimore County, Baltimore City, like the entire state. There's a DOORS office to service everyone, and that's a field office or a field service office. We also have OBVS, which is the office for people who are visually impaired or blind. And then we have our training facility in Baltimore, or our headquarters, which is the Workforce and Technology Center. Yes. So for pre-employment transition services or PREATS, you need to be a student between the ages of 14 and 21, enrolled in school, And the purpose of pre-eds is to help students who are enrolled in school get access to exploring work and getting like work experience and training before actually having like a real job and going into the workforce. And there are 5 different categories within pre-eds, and we'll go over them in the next couple of slides. So this video will pretty much explain everything that I'll probably say later and have to clear up. So you can play it.
Margie, you might
Okay.
have to share this sound.
Okay.
So if you go to
Um,
the share and then advance, you should be able to then do computer audio.
Okay. Oh. Let me pause. Okay. Um,
Yes, we will give a copy of this presentation to everyone. So I will send a follow-up email with the copy of the presentation and where will be posted.
mm, that working?
No.
Okay. Well,
I can just, I mean, if you go back to the slides past the video, like it explains everything in the video. So I can just talk about it. It's fine. Okay. So to qualify for pre-eds, you again have to be enrolled in school or post-secondary education or anything that is recognized as an educational program, whether it's homeschool, private school, whatever. You have to be at least 14 years old, but uh, um, sorry, a survey popped up. You have to be at least 14 years old, but cannot be over the age of 22, and you have to have a documented disability. I've had people, ask like, well, I had or say that they have a certain disability, but if it's not documented, like from a medical doctor and signed off on like an IEP or anything, then that won't work, or a doctor's note or anything. Next slide. Okay, so there are 5 categories within pre-eds that we do programs in. So we do job exploration counseling, which helps students explore different like jobs and discover some career interests that they may have. There's a work-based learning experience. If you ever heard of anybody indoors referring to a Weeble, it's a work-based learning experience. So students are able to work a part-time job and get paid, but they're gaining like meaningful working skills throughout the program. Um, Post-secondary counseling is just helping students understand different career paths that they can take when they're in college and different skills that they'll learn while they're enrolled in school and selecting studies. Work readiness training is to help students gain work skills and know what to prepare for when they're in the workforce. Interacting with supervisors and peers, like it says, like timeliness, and just understanding how life works in an actual job. And the last one is self-advocacy training. So students will take a program to advocate for themselves, understand how they communicate their needs for themselves and needs in the workplace as well. So these slides will talk about employment services. I know when I have my consumers and I'm meeting with them, I call these adult services because although you are a student and enrolled in school, you can still participate in these services with a VR case or vocational rehabilitation case. So the eligibility for a student services case or an adult case, as I say, yes, if you're enrolled in school, then you have to be a student with a disability. Or if you have graduated, then you don't have to be enrolled in school. You just need to have a documented disability on medical notes, IEP from your school year, and need assistance with finding employment. So the difference with pre-ets and employment services is that you have access to a lot more. Like you can have a VR case and still have pre-et services, but the main goal is to help you become employed. So we have career assessments, there's counseling and guidance, which is usually the counselor's job to the student and family. There's job coaching, job development, assistance during the job search, vocational training programs and technical programs, just a lot more. Autism support programs for students going to college, um, uh, anything that you can think of that's related to the job search, Doors will assist with mostly. So this is general information about Doors. So every high school in the state of Maryland, public high school, has a doors counselor assigned. And the role for the doors counselor with schools are to help their consumers transition into work after high school, even if they're going to college, like we're there to help them find job placement and training within that transition. Doors is state and federally funded on both the pre-ets and adult services. So there is no specific timeline with Doors. It's just required that you're at least 14 years old to join or to do the referral. But you can be 14, 24, 34, 84. If you have a disability and you're looking for employment, Doors is there to support you. So there's no timeline on services, but it is a short-term program. Doors is not meant to stick with you through a lifetime. That's more of a DDA thing. But if you have a Doors case for 3 years, then it just takes 3 years for you to finish your training and get job placement, then that's fine. But it's not meant to be a very long situation. Now, if you are enrolled in high school or have a student enrolled in high school, then obviously they'll have Doors until they're out of high school and beyond until they're placed into employment. But there's no specific timeline. Just be 14 years old to join. So again, the Workforce and Technology Center is our headquarters or training center, and that is where all of our training happenings. We have, I want to say it's eight or nine different training programs that we offer to our consumers. Just to name some, there's childcare, auto detailing, auto mechanic, warehouse training, food services, professional animal workers, CVS pharmacy technician, and CVS retail. I could be missing one, environmental services. But they also offer academic tutoring for your GED, employment services. Once you completed a training program, you're put in touch with the employment specialist to help you look for a job in the field that you just finished your training in. Work readiness. So you might not be ready for any of the training programs, but you do work readiness first to sort of prepare you, get your feet wet, and then you can go into a program. And there's a dorm. The programs are stay away. So the student will stay at the program for the duration of weeks, if it's 8 weeks, 10 weeks, but come home every weekend and go back and forth home every week until the end of the program. And the programs are offered to everybody indoors in any capacity once they're done with high school. And that's with the VRKs, if they're on the deaf and hard of hearing caseload, the OBVS, which is the blind and low vision case. We do offer autism support for any students with autism going to the WTC as well. In order to get started with doors, at the base, you have to put in a referral at doors.maryland.gov. Once you click the link on the left-hand side, you will see Request Door Services. You click on that and this screen will pop up. If you have a student who is at least in 11th grade, do not put in a referral for pre-employment transition services, because when they graduate from high school, there will be no funding for services. Please sign up for employment services under age 25 if you have a rising junior or senior. I cannot stress that enough. Employment services under age 25 if you have a rising junior or senior. Write it down, take notes. If you sign up for pre-employment transition services and you are, a graduating senior, and then let's say like now it's April 2nd. If you did the referral now and you're and you have a student that's still in high school, and then by the time they're found eligible, they've graduated. Now you have a pre-employment case open, but there's nothing we can do because the student has graduated. So then you have to do another referral for employment services under 25 because that's what they qualify for at that point, not pre-employment services. Hopefully that makes sense. So once the referral is submitted, you will be assigned to an eligibility counselor who will work with you to get like medical documents and all your school, like IEP 504, and all the documentation that you need to be found eligible for a DOORS case. After you have your intake with the eligibility counselor and they have all of your documentation, if they found that you qualify for services, you will be put in eligible status and then placed with a field counselor like myself or another counselor in whatever county or office you're near. And then we'll have a meeting and discuss services and develop an employment plan and all of that good stuff. Okay, I'm just going to read this. So important notes, requesting pre-employment transition services or PREETs does not make you eligible for student employment services. Requesting PREET services does not make you eligible for student employment services. Just put a star by that, just so you know. You must still apply and be found eligible to receive student employment services if you are interested, because they are two different programs. Youth with disabilities found eligible for employment services can continue to receive employment services after they exit school. So if you remember me saying you can do PREET things on the employment services case, that's what I'm referring to. Because if they have a VR case or employment services case, once they graduate from high school, it just sort of rolls over. So they'll still have that program once they graduate if they have the employment services case. And an individual can be referred to employment services after they exit school, even if they've never accessed door services while they were a student. Okay. If you are in Montgomery County, you do not have to contact these two offices, as these are for Prince George's County. There we go. This can be also accessed on doors.maryland.gov under resources. So in Montgomery County, we have a Germantown office and we have a Wheaton office. So here's the information if you would like to write it down. And we'll take any questions that you have.
All right. So I know that there's been some questions. I know that Valerie has been answering some of them. Let's see. So if anyone would be interested in possibly just speaking a question, if you can raise your hand by pressing raise hand, and then that way I can actually open your volume and you'll be able to speak. Okay, so we have Marianne. So let me get Marianne. Wait 1 second. Where are you, Marianne? Oh, here we go. Okay. Oh, hold on. All right, Marianne. If you can unmute, then you'll be able to speak.
Okay. Okay, you should be able to hear me now.
Yes.
Yeah, just so you know, I had to be made into a panelist.
Into a panelist. I know I clicked the wrong one, but I figured it was
Oh, well.
easier than redoing it.
You know, I feel very important. Okay, our daughter is 32 years old, and she had been through the Doors program a couple years ago, right before and then during COVID, and had you know, and she managed to get a job, not through Doors, but we got her a job at the YMCA, which she's had for the last 2.5 years and has been successfully working there. But if she ever quits that job or loses that job, will she be re-eligible for Doors services? I mean, they closed out the file on her, so does she have to reapply and start
Yes,
all
she
over
would
again?
need to reapply. Yep. And do a referral and go through the eligibility process again.
Okay, all right,
Mhm.
that's all. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so I'll actually move you back to attendee. Okay, and then we have, let's see, we have Carrie. All right, I'm gonna do it this right time. Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. I got a letter for my son. He is 15. He'll be 16 in June. We had, I guess, an intake appointment over the phone, and we have a letter that says the next step is to schedule a meeting to discuss the pre-employment transition services. And so I'm supposed to call to schedule an appointment. With his age, should we not be doing the pre-employment transition services? Or what do you suggest we do?
I'm going to always suggest a VR case, regardless of age. I mean, you can be 14 with a VR case. You just have it for a little longer. But at that point, it's your personal preference. So if he's 15 and in
He's a
10th
sophomore.
grade, yeah, 10th
Yeah.
grade, you can do a pre-ets case and have that open if that's what you prefer. But just know that when he graduates, or before he graduates, a VR case is going to need to be, like, a referral is going to have to be done. So to
Okay.
save yourself the headache and do the whole thing over, I would
Mhm.
just do the VR case, or the slides say employment services case under
Okay.
25.
So should I call this person, and can I like change this to an employment services, or I just need to kind of start the process over?
Um, I mean, if they haven't opened it yet, I mean, they should be able to go in and, like, check a couple boxes.
Mhm.
I am not sure.
Okay, when I call, I'll
My
ask.
supervisor may be able to answer that better than I can, but I think if you're at that point,
Mhm.
I think you can still, like, go ahead and switch it to employment services.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so there seems to be a question, and maybe I don't know if there's someone that we can maybe reference to, but that they're saying that door services are paused, and then Valerie's saying it's not. But
Yeah.
obviously somebody got maybe,
So
you know,
I think it's a confusion in the verbiage.
okay.
Sometimes people will say pause, or sometimes people say we're waiting. Things get approved. So, you know, if it has to go higher up or something, it gets
So,
approved at certain levels, but let the supervisor explain.
right. So at this time, no door services are paused. We are moving cautiously, of course, but there are no services that are paused at this time. Per administration, we just had a statewide meeting this morning. Services are up and running. Practices are, like I said, we are conservative at this moment, but no services are paused or stopped. We are providing services every day to our consumers. So maybe it was a misunderstanding. Please get with your counselor or your counselor supervisor, because at this time we haven't paused any services. So maybe that was a miscommunication. Also, I can't speak for Danielle Henson. She is an adult vocational rehabilitation supervisor, and we are transitioning unit. So get with Danielle Henson and ask for clarification, because to my knowledge, there are no services paused at this time. And like I said, we just had a statewide meeting this morning at 9 a.m. And as of 9 a.m., our assistant superintendent stated there are no pause services. So yeah, get with your counselors, get with your counselor supervisor,
When you say
and get clarification.
conservative, how would that like affect anybody? Like, with
So conservative means like like for instance, like there are extra steps to approving certain funding. Like, okay, so when I say that, like say, like normally we could just go ahead and apply for funding for summer activities. Like right now, we're not doing that. Like we're doing immediate need. Like if
Okay.
it's future need, we'll handle it as we get there. So that's why I'm saying conservatively.
Okay.
And there is a meeting tomorrow, I think it's at 4, about policy changes. So there will be some policy changes that are coming down the pipe. And so that's going to be very publicly, it's going to be put out on our website. There's a public meeting about it tomorrow. So yeah, so that's what we mean by conservatively.
Okay, thank you. And is there any way that you could maybe put any of that information for the meeting? So that way some of the attendees, if they want to come to the meeting, they can?
Valerie, you're on mute.
I'm sorry about that. Let me get the information. I'm pretty sure it's on our website because
Okay,
transparency. We have to have transparency.
yeah, of course, yes. Okay. And Pat, if you could maybe check the website too, see if you
I'm
can
gonna
find.
put it in the chat.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I'm getting the information, but
Okay.
it's a public meeting. Hold on one second. I gotta get it from my calendar.
Yeah,
Okay,
I have doors up right now, so if there's something here I can find.
fabulous.
So I just put the link to the meeting. It's a
Okay.
Zoom. And it's listed as the Maryland State Rehabilitation Council Policy Review. And I lost track of the questions in the chat.
All right. Well, I'm actually gonna let Keith talk next, so I'm gonna allow him to talk. But thank you for doing the questions in the chat, and then that way I can get the speakers to speak. All right, Keith, I'm allowing you to talk.
Hi, can you
Hello.
hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
So 2 years ago, I applied and my daughter was given pre-employment transition services. I guess you said PECS. And we spoke with her counselor. So then the school came back and recommended that we have another evaluation, and she was just given vocational counseling. So those two go together.
I'm trying to understand your question. Can you,
So I think I got it tailored. So
okay,
yes, you can receive pre-employment transition services and have a student employment services case as long as the consumer is a student. The day that they lose the status of student or they become over the age of 22, they're no longer eligible for those pre-employment services. So yes, sir, they can coincide and she can receive both at the same time.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any additional questions?
I'm sorry, BC, I'm gonna have them talk. I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
forgot it was.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you. We're just really confused. My daughter is not transitioning. She's been through Montgomery County Schools years ago. She's 32. But she spent 3 months, November, December, January, 3-4 months going through this DOORS program, the application process back and forth for employment services many months. She was accepted as a client. We have a multi-page document that says you get 10 hours of resume, and you get 20 hours of this, and excuse me, 60 or 80 hours of actually, looking for jobs and going on interviews. And she went on one interview about a week and a half ago, with her counselor, with her Jessa, I guess, employment specialist. But last week, out of nowhere, completely out of nowhere, our employment specialist calls us and says, I'm waiting for Randy Sullivan and Daniel Henson to send me, confirmation to keep working with your daughter, a purchase order, excuse me. She's waiting for a purchase order, and she can't continue because they had an appointment that very day to meet at their office in Rockville for, to do employment work. And she said, don't come. There's no money. They're not funding us. They cut us off. We called Randy Sullivan, who called Miss Henson, and they confirmed that there is no money. They're not giving anything to anybody. It could be a week, it could be weeks. He told me, Randy Sullivan, it could be a month, could be months, but all the monies have been on hold. And he kind of insinuated that it was because of the federal government, that the state isn't using. I mean, this is DOORS money that's already been allocated to my daughter. And now she's sitting at home waiting to try to get to a counselor and get some help and try to get a job. And we have just been completely blindsided by DOORS, and they're not even contacting us at this point. They just said, just sit and wait. Any suggestions?
The suggestion I have is to contact Danielle Henson. That's a totally different office, totally different region. So just know that we are.
That you guys
hold on, let me finish.
No,
So just know that we're 80%.
Hold on. Let her speak. Hold on.
Go ahead.
We are 80% federally funded. So that means that we receive money each quarter. So that means we just had a spending resolution that was approved. However, it doesn't automatically just come to us. So please be patient. Reach out to Randy and Danielle for further instruction. But I can't speak to that office. I can only speak to my region and my office.
But as far as your region and your office is concerned, you haven't been cut off in the last 10 days.
I wouldn't say cut off. We are moving in a conservative manner.
We've already started, sir.
But I mean, we're in the middle of services. This stinks. This is
I
absolutely
understand that.
acceptable.
And so you would need to talk to Danielle and her
Well,
staff. Maybe if you talk
unfortunately-
to Danielle's supervisor, who is Sherry Plump. But I can't speak to a whole nother region or a whole nother office.
Okay. I just feel completely and utterly let down by DOORS. I've lived in the state of Maryland for 69 years, and I just, can't believe that they would send you a package that took 4 months to get and say you have this, 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 and this, and you're entitled to this, go get it. And then the counselor starts working with you, and they just go, sorry, we don't have we can't send any money out. We're done. Our hands are tied. We're not, we can't, we're out of business, and it might take a few weeks, it might take a few months.
Sir,
So I do apologize for everything that's going on. Like I said, again, that's a totally different office in a totally different region.
But
and
DOORS
so
is
I
DOORS.
can't,
DOORS is DOORS.
but sir, the way that
when I
funding
call Ms.
flows,
Plunk-
it doesn't
Yeah.
just flow from one big pot. So each region receives a certain amount. Each office receives a certain amount. Like it's out of, I'm just gonna be real with you, it's out of our hands how things are flowing right now. We are moving in a conservative manner. Please contact that particular office. I
Yes.
cannot speak for that office
Yes.
or region. I can only speak for my office and my region. Unfortunately, I'm so sorry I cannot be of any additional assistance. And I do apologize again.
Okay.
All right, so does anybody have any other questions? Okay, let's see,
And
Ellen.
so I want to do just say, just like in the Paula put in there, you can always reach out to client assistance program. You can also reach out to the omnibus with headquarters in our Doris office. Her name is, Lord Jesus, I can't think of her last name. Um, mm, 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 mm. You can reach out. Go
McGinley?
ahead,
Is it
yeah,
Samantha
Samantha
McGinley?
McGinley. Yes.
Mhm.
And those individuals can give you answers. I, at this time, yes, Marla is very helpful. So if you have any grievances at any time, you can always reach out to the Client Assistance Program or the Omnibus, Samantha McGinley, and you can always, you know, give them your grievances and they'll work on your behalf. Um, that's the next steps outside of calling Danielle's supervisor, Sherry Plump. I mean,
All right, Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Price. I think that those of us who receive services that go through the state versus what Michael Dalto will be talking about, Social Security, which is purely a federal program, get a little bit confused about the relationship between the state funding and the federal funding. And especially at such a time as this, it's going to be very, very important that we all understand how absolutely dependent our state services are, whether they come through a Medicaid waiver or through DOORS or through some other mechanism, how very dependent they are on federal funding. And so my question for you, Ms. Price, is based on the meeting that you had this morning, and if this is going to be in the upcoming community meeting presented by DOORS, my apologies. I'm certainly not trying to waste your time, but I'm just curious if you received any information on the impact that is being anticipated on services such as DOORS at the state level because of decisions being made at the federal level.
No. They'll tell us information as they get it, but just to be straight with you, the answer is no. There's no information or anything that we will know that will impact us or our consumers.
so at this time, we are all waiting to see what is going to happen. There's no clear directive on how budget cuts will affect DOORS. So at this time, I haven't been given any information. Like I just said, we had a statewide meeting, and I honestly feel everyone is waiting to see. So at this time, we do not know the impacts as of yet. But I'm sure we will know, especially coming the new fiscal year.
I think that because we, with the school system are also MSDE, as is DOORS, Maryland State Department of Education, we're all kind of waiting for this, what comes next from the federal funds, because a good portion of all of our funding is federal. So none of us know at this point. I don't know that the superintendent of the state knows at this point exactly what to expect regarding funding over the next few years. So we're all waiting. We're all hoping for the best.
Right, so let me see if Michael Dalto is here. All right, so
I am here.
oh, perfect. So we actually ended a little bit early. So I thought we could get started since, you have a lot of wonderful information.
Great.
All right, I'm adding you to the spotlight. Thank you, Taylor. And thank you, Valerie. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
All right, Michael, you're up.
Great. Thank you very much, Melissa. So I'm Michael Dalto with High Note Consulting. And when my daughter was about 5 years old, I remember one weekend, it was a Saturday, she went to the supermarket with her mom, and it was one of those holiday weekends when everybody was in the supermarket. It was just wall to wall people. You could barely move. And her mother said to her, "Oh, Nora, I get agoraphobic in places like this. And if you're not up to speed on your psychiatric diagnoses, agoraphobia is fear of being in public places." But of course, my 5-year-old didn't know that. She just knew that her mother was in some distress and she wanted to support her. So she said, "Yeah, Mommy, I get agoraphobic too. And if I can find it, I also get ice cream." And my daughter has taught me a lot about making lemonade out of lemons. And in this case, the lemon is we have a system of public benefits. SSI is just one piece of it that have complicated rules. Every benefit has different rules. It can be difficult to qualify for benefits initially. And it's often a confusing maze for people. The lemonade is that there are rules, safety nets called work incentives that help protect benefits when people work, that are designed precisely to enable people to do paid work and get ahead financially without losing benefits that they absolutely need. So I'm going to be focusing on several of these work incentives. But first, I imagine some of you have children who are not yet getting SSI benefits, but who might be applying at some point. And so I'm going to give you some background information about the SSI program, who's eligible, what medical benefit comes along with it, how to save money and still keep it, that sort of thing. And then we'll move into the work rules. So we're ready for the next slide, please. So SSI is a cash benefit that people can get from the Social Security Administration. It's actually not funded by the Social Security Trust Fund. So when you hear about how Social Security is going to run out of money in another 10 years, that sort of thing, that does not apply to the SSI program. SSI is funded with general tax revenues. So it's conceivable that it may be safer than Social Security benefits like retirement and disability. But to qualify for SSI, you have to either have a significant disability or be at least 65 years old, even if you're not disabled. Have to be a US citizen or a person, an immigrant living legally in the US who meets certain other requirements. And bear with me just a moment. I am not seeing the entire slide. Okay, here we go. And very importantly, you have to not have much money. Have to have income and resources or assets below certain limits. And this begs a question: what's the difference between income and a resource? And we're going to come back and look at the dollar amounts, the dollar limits for income and resources. But a trainer friend of mine likes to say that income is what you get and resources are what you got. So if you receive money during a calendar month, it counts as income that month, and it counts against an income limit. If you have any of that money left over when the next calendar month begins that you haven't spent or converted into a source that doesn't count. We'll talk about that momentarily. So if you have money left over from that income you received in 1 month, when the next month begins, the first day of the next calendar month, that remaining amount becomes a resource. And it remains a resource as long as you have it. And then it's subject to a different limit on resources. So the month you get it, it's income. Any month you keep it after the month you received it, it becomes a resource. Next slide, please. So how disabled do you have to be? An adult, there's a different definition of disability for adults than for children. An adult has to have a severe disability. It has to have lasted or be expected to last at least a year or be a terminal illness. And the disability has to limit the person's ability to work, has to prevent them from doing substantial work. Social Security uses the term substantial gainful activity because one rule for Social Security bureaucrats is never use one syllable if 9 would do just as well. But the disability has to limit your ability to work, does not have to prevent you from working completely. So what does substantial work mean? Usually it means unable to earn more than $1,620 a month in pre-tax earnings, though there are many circumstances in which earnings can be higher and still not be considered to be substantial, and a person could still initially qualify for SSI. But it's very important to note that you can be capable of working. You can even be working throughout the application process and still qualify for SSI. But your disability does have to significantly limit your ability to work. Now, if a person is blind, if they meet Social Security's definition of blindness, then they're not subject to that substantial work requirement. They could be doing substantial work and still qualify for SSI. So they could be earning more than a non-blind person could and still qualify for SSI. And the definition of blindness that Social Security uses is that the vision in your better eye with correction is no better than 20/200, or your field of vision is no greater than 20 degrees. Okay. Great, thank you. So what are the financial limits for SSI? What's the income limit? It depends on the kind of income the person gets. The SSI program divides income into 2 kinds, unearned and earned. Now, earned income would be money that a person receives as direct compensation for work they did, like wages, self-employment income, tips, salaries, that sort of thing. And unearned income would be basically anything else. It could be Social Security payments, pensions, annuities, dividends, interest, unemployment benefits, workers' compensation, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if a person has no other income besides SSI, then they don't have to worry about the income limit. They'll certainly meet it if they have no income. If they have other income and it's only unearned, so it's not like wages or self-employment, then their income usually has to be under $987 a month this year in 2025 to initially qualify for SSI. If they don't have any unearned income, but they are working and getting paid for work, then after they've initially qualified for SSI, which usually means their earnings were less than $1,620 a month when they applied, after they get approved, then they could be earning more and still keep at least some of their SSI. In fact, if they're earning less than $2,019 a month after their SSI payments have started, they can still qualify for a little bit of SSI. Next slide, please. And what's the limit on resources? It's only $2,000. So that's the bad news, is that the SSI program has a very low limit on resources, on savings and the like. But there's good news. And the good news is not all resources count against that limit. Most resources do count, and that includes cash, bank accounts, stocks, bonds, investments, the cash surrender value of a whole life insurance policy, retirement accounts generally, real estate other than the home that you live in, and many others. Okay. But very importantly, the SSI program does not count certain resources or assets against that $2,000 limit. One is the home the person lives in. You can own $1 million home free and clear with no mortgage. As long as you live in it, it doesn't count against the $2,000 limit. Neither does one motor vehicle you own. It's nice to know that you can own a home as long as you live in it and have a car and still be eligible for SSI. Other resources that don't count would be life insurance that has no cash surrender value, has only a death benefit, usually called term life insurance, certain burial funds, special needs trusts. I imagine many of you are familiar with these. They're special accounts set up to benefit a person with a disability. Most commonly, they're set up so that a person with a disability can receive money, maybe an inheritance from a relative, and still be eligible for benefits like SSI. So the money in the trust is not owned by the person with a disability. This legal entity called the trust owns the money, and the person with a disability does not control the money. They can't take money out of the trust to pay for their expenses. Another party called a trustee is named to manage the money in the trust. But the good news is the trustee can only use the money in the trust to pay for expenses that benefit the person with the disability. So the person with a disability gets the sole benefit of the money in the trust, but they don't own it and they don't control it. And there's no limit on how much money can go into a special needs trust. So if, a relative wanted to leave money in their will to a relative who gets SSI, they can have their will stipulate that the money is going to go into the person's special needs trust. And then it won't count against the $2,000 resource limit. Property that a person uses for a job or business doesn't count against the $2,000 limit. And then comes my favorite, something called an ABLE account. And the first $100,000 in an ABLE account does not count against that $2,000 resource limit, which is great news. It means people can save almost 50 times the $2,000 resource limit and still be eligible for SSI. So an ABLE account, next slide, please. An ABLE account is an account that's set up by or for a person with a disability to be able to save money and not have all of it count against the $2,000 resource limit. Person's disability had to start before age 26. Since this is a presentation for people in the transition age, I'm assuming all of you are here on behalf of someone who became disabled before they turned 26. Note that a person can open an ABLE account long after age 26, as long as their disability started before they were 26 years old. And as I said, the first $100,000 saved in an ABLE account doesn't count against the $2,000 resource limit for SSI. Anybody can contribute to a person's ABLE account. The person with a disability who owns it, family, friends, agencies, even strangers can contribute to it. But generally, the limit on total contributions from everybody who's contributing to a person's ABLE account can't be more than a designated amount each year. In 2025, that limit is $19,000. And if no more than that amount is contributed to a person's ABLE account, the person with a disability who owns the account does not have to pay taxes on any of the money that they received in their ABLE account from others. Next slide, please. Now, once the money is in the ABLE account, it can be withdrawn and used to pay for a wide variety of expenses: education, housing, ordinary living expenses like food and clothing, transportation, employment, training and support, assistive technology, health, prevention, and wellness. Next slide. Financial management, other expenses, even funeral and burial expenses, which obviously would be the last expense used out of an ABLE account. Next slide. Now, a person who lives in Maryland has a choice of dozens of different states to open their ABLE account in, not just Maryland. But there are two compelling reasons why a Maryland resident may want to open their ABLE account with the Maryland ABLE account program. One is, in most states, if a person has an ABLE account and they pass away while there's still money left in their ABLE account, the state can claim any funds that remain in the ABLE account up to the amount that was spent on expenses through the Medicaid program for that person after their ABLE account was opened. Fortunately, a handful of years ago, Maryland passed a law that said, we're not going to do that. If a person in Maryland, a Maryland resident with a Maryland ABLE account dies, the state will not claim the money that remains in their ABLE account unless another federal law requires it. So that's good news. Another good news is a tax break. Any Maryland resident who contributes to any Maryland ABLE account can deduct on their Maryland state income taxes the amount of their contributions up to $2,500 a year on their state income tax return. Now, that's a tax deduction, not a tax credit. So the person will not save $2,500 in taxes. They'd probably save several hundred, but nonetheless, it's a tax break rather than none, which you would get if you lived in Maryland and opened your ABLE account in another state. ABLE account programs give a choice of investment options, from very conservative with very low interest to moderate or more aggressive options with stocks and bonds, where you have far greater chance of getting a bigger return on your money, although also the possibility of losing money. And the website for the Maryland ABLE account program is marylandable.org. And I definitely encourage you to look into it if your relative who gets SSI or maybe applying for SSI does not already have one. Next slide, please. So what's the most SSI a person can get in the state of Maryland? This year, it's $967 a month for an unmarried individual. Now, an adult who's getting SSI generally has to pay something for their own housing to be able to get the maximum SSI. If they don't pay anything for housing, the maximum SSI benefit they can get is reduced by 1/3. It goes down to only $644.67 a month. So they'd lose well over $300 a month in SSI. To get the maximum SSI, they have to be paying for housing, but they don't have to pay a market rate for housing. They only have to be paying at least $342.33 a month. That amount will go up somewhat in January of 2026, and each year after that. That amount is 1/3 of the maximum SSI benefit plus $20. So it makes sense for a person to pay at least that amount for their housing and then be able to get the maximum SSI. You can use a simple rental agreement and monthly receipts just to document that the person paid for housing. So if you're a parent or another family member, you have an individual with SSI living with you, you can charge them for housing in order to maximize their SSI. Now, aside from that, if the person has other income besides SSI, that will usually reduce the amount of SSI they can get. Usually, if a person has other income, they won't get $967 a month of SSI. They'll get less. Next slide, please. Now, here's a question I'm asked often. Can I supplement my family member's income without reducing their SSI? And the answer is yes, you can. I'm going to tell you, first of all, what you don't want to do, and then what you do want to do to supplement a family member's income. What you don't want to do is give that family member who gets SSI money. If you give them money directly and Social Security finds out, it counts as income, as so-called unearned income, and it will reduce their SSI almost dollar for dollar by the amount you gave them. It would completely defeat the purpose of having given them money. And you don't want to give them free housing because that'll reduce the SSI by 1/3. What you do want to do is make sure they have an ABLE account and contribute money to their ABLE account. When you put money into your family member's ABLE account, that does not count as income against their SSI benefit. It does not reduce their SSI. When they spend the money on allowable expenses, that doesn't reduce their SSI either. In fact, you could, if you wanted to push the envelope a little bit, if you didn't want to charge your son or your daughter for housing, but you still wanted them to get the maximum SSI, you could contribute at least $342.33 a month to their ABLE account. They could use that money that you put in their ABLE account to pay you for their housing, and that would qualify them for the maximum SSI. I'm not recommending that you do that because SSI is first and foremost designed to help people pay for housing. So I think it makes sense for people to use the SSI money to pay for that housing. But this would be a loophole, a way around that. Nonetheless, it's great to know that you can supplement the income of a family member on SSI by putting money into their ABLE account rather than giving them money or putting it in their regular bank account. Next slide. So when a person gets SSI in the state of Maryland in any amount, the minimum amount you can get is $1 a month. As I said, the maximum amount for an unmarried individual is $967 a month. If a person gets anywhere between $1 a month and $967 a month of SSI, they are automatically eligible for a medical benefit known as Medicaid. And in the state of Maryland, we give it another name. It's also called medical assistance. This is another rule for bureaucrats trying to confuse the public. Give some benefits more than one name, keeps all of us off balance. So in the state of Maryland, Medicaid equals medical assistance. That's the same thing. Okay. And medical assistance is a great benefit to have. It provides comprehensive coverage, covers pretty much all medical expenses that you would expect health insurance to cover, with no copays except very small copays for prescriptions. And it also covers some services that people with disabilities need that other insurance will rarely, if ever, cover. And for those of you with young family members who are anticipating maybe getting services from the Developmental Disabilities Administration when they leave school, or the Behavioral Health Administration, if they have Medicaid, that will be very helpful in enabling them to get those services. Now, it can be a little challenging to find healthcare providers who accept medical assistance. In my experience, all hospitals and pharmacies do, but beyond that, it can be a little challenging to find other healthcare providers, but they're certainly out there, and there's certainly plenty in Montgomery County. It's not the majority of healthcare providers in the county, but there are a good number of them. Next slide, please. And a person can have both medical assistance, also known as Medicaid, and other insurance. So if a person has private insurance through their own employment or a family member's employment, they can also have medical assistance, and the medical assistance can supplement the private insurance. Some people get Medicare and also get Medicaid. And that's the third rule for bureaucrats confusing the public. Give very different benefits, very similar sounding names. Medicaid and Medicare sound very much alike, but they're very different benefits. But if a person has Medicare and they have medical assistance or Medicaid in the state of Maryland, their medical assistance will eliminate virtually all of the out-of-pocket costs they would otherwise have to pay for Medicare. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to get to my favorite part. What happens if you get SSI and you go to work? So first, I want to confide that if your family member has not yet applied for SSI or has just recently begun to receive it, you may be a little concerned about the possibility of losing it, especially if you've been told it's hard to get, or if you had to go through a lengthy process, maybe even with appeals, in order to qualify for that benefit initially. The good news is a person on SSI is allowed to work, they're able to work, and they're encouraged to work. And they're encouraged not just verbally, but through these rules, these safety nets called work incentives that limit the impact of work on benefits. Because this is a fairly abbreviated presentation, I've left out some information, but because I got to start early, I'll give you a little bit more detail here. And I'll tell you that most people, even with very severe disabilities and low income and resources, don't qualify for SSI as children because when a child under age 18 applies for SSI, the SSI program looks not only at their own money, but at their parents' money if they live with one or two parents. A portion of the parents' income and resources are counted against their child's SSI eligibility. So usually parents have too much money for their children under age 18 to qualify for SSI. Although a family does not have to be in dire poverty in order for a child under 18 to be eligible for SSI. I'll give you an example. In a family of 4, 2 parents, 2 children, 1 child with a disability who may be applying for SSI. Children have no income. The parents' income is all from wages, from their jobs. The parents could have combined earnings from their jobs of up to a little over $65,000 a year, and their child with a disability could still potentially be eligible for at least a little bit of SSI and the medical assistance that comes with it. Okay, so do have to have fairly limited income, but not in dire poverty as far as a family goes for a child to qualify for SSI. But most children don't qualify because their parents have too much money. Once the child becomes an adult, once they turn 18, then only the individual with a disability, only their own money counts, only their own income and resources. And that's why most people who qualify for SSI become eligible for it once they turn 18. So if you have a child who's under 18 and you have too much money, the parents have too much money for your child to get SSI. Once your child turns 18, becomes an adult, one of your birthday gifts to them for turning 18 should be a call to Social Security to schedule an appointment to apply for SSI. Next slide, please. So in the SSI program, there are some safety nets. The first one to know is a person on SSI is always better off financially working than not working. Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind about the SSI program is that there is a logic to it. And the logic is to make sure that eligible people have at least a basic minimum amount of money to pay for living expenses, especially housing. Now, when I say minimal, I mean minimal. It's not easy to live on $967 a month, the maximum SSI. But if a person is eligible for SSI, they have no other income, it makes sense that ordinarily they should get the maximum SSI of $967 a month because they need all of it to be able to eke out a bare existence, covering their living expenses with that. If they have other income, they will ordinarily get less SSI. In theory, they don't need as much. If they're getting other income, they can use that to help pay for housing and other expenses, and they wouldn't need as much SSI. So you can think of the relationship between other income and SSI as being like a balance or a scale or a seesaw. As the other income goes up, the SSI goes down. But the reverse is also true. If other income goes down, then the person needs more SSI to cover their expenses, and it can go up. So if you keep that seesaw or scale image in mind, it's helpful when understanding how work affects SSI. So it makes sense that if a person goes to work and has earnings from work, that will reduce their SSI. And it may make you think, well, what's the point in working? If your SSI is going to go down because of your earnings from work, then how do you end up getting ahead? I mean, you earn money, but your SSI gets cut. Don't you just break even? Luckily, the answer is no. The answer is no, because when you work for pay, your pay from work only reduces your SSI by less than half the amount that you were paid in gross wages. So yes, your SSI goes down, but your income goes up higher than the amount of SSI reduction because you keep your wages. And even though your SSI is reduced, it's only reduced by less than half of your wages. So you come out ahead. So for example, a person who starts out on the maximum SSI of $967 a month, as their earnings from work increase, their SSI decreases, but they can still get $1 of SSI once their earnings reach $2,018 a month in pre-tax earnings, like gross wages. So are they better off working? You bet. Working, in that example, they'd have $2,018 of wages and $1 of SSI. That's a lot more money than what they started out with, which was just $967 of SSI. Even though they may have to pay some taxes on the wages, what they'll have left over will still be much less, much more than $967. Okay, next slide, please. So not only can I say safely that a person on SSI is always better off financially working than not working, I can also safely say that the more a person earns, the more they work, the more they earn, the more net income they will have. And I wanted to give you a quick example of that. On the next slide, I'll be showing you a bar graph that illustrates it. But here's a situation example with Marshawn, who started getting only SSI, the maximum $967 a month. He started working 15 hours a week, earning $15 an hour. My apologies. I know this is the $15 an hour is not up to the current Montgomery County minimum wage. It's the minimum wage in most of the rest of the state, but just bear with me here. So he starts out working 15 hours a week at $15 an hour, then increases his hours to 25 hours a week, and finally full-time 40 hours a week. And next slide, please. And let's look at what happens to his net income. This bar graph shows his SSI amount in blue and his wages after taxes in pink or orange, or however that appears on your screen. So in the first column, when he's not working, he's getting only SSI of $967 a month, all in blue. Second column, working 15 hours a week, his SSI gets significantly reduced. It's reduced by almost half of what it started out with. It's only a little over $500 a month. But when you add on to that, his wages, even after taxes are taken out, his net income is substantially greater than $967 a month. It's in the $1,400 a month range. Then when he increases his hours to 25 a week, the SSI gets reduced greatly. You can see there's not all that much blue left in the third column. It's only like in the $150 range. But adding his after-tax wages on top of that, he's got close to about $1,600 a month. So he's still better off. Finally, working full-time at $15 an hour, his earnings are high enough that it reduces Marshawn's SSI to 0. There's no blue left at all in that fourth column. But even without any SSI, and even after taxes, he's much better off financially. His net income after taxes is over $2,100 a month. So when you get SSI, the more you earn, the more you have, the higher your net income. Next slide, please. And the news gets better. First off, I imagine many of you have family members who are still in school, either in high school, potentially in college, or a job training course, a vocational training program. And there are some special rules for people that enable them to keep more SSI while working than under the usual formula. I mean, the usual formula says your SSI will be cut by less than half of your earnings from work. These other rules I'm about to relate say you can keep even more SSI while you're working under certain circumstances. And the most generous of these special rules or work incentives is just for students who are under age 22. It's called the Student Earned Income Exclusion. And this rule says, if you're a student, you're under age 22, and you're attending school regularly, then you can earn up to $9,460 a year in gross wages in 2025 and not have your SSI reduced at all. So that's a fantastic work incentive. It's also very smart public policy because there are bunches of studies that show that if a young person in their teens, maybe early 20s, gets paid work experience, they are far more likely to work as adults and be less dependent on public benefits in the long run. So it makes sense to encourage people to get an early start with work by letting them, as students, get some paid work experience and not have their SSI reduced at all. Okay. Incidentally, I said a person has to be under age 22 and a student regularly attending school. What does regularly attending mean? It means if you're in grades 7 through 12, have to be attending classes at least 12 hours a week. If you're in college, have to attend classes at least 8 hours a week. And if you're in what the Social Security calls a job training course, have to be attending at least 12 hours a week or at least 15 hours a week if there's a shop class involved. So not a very demanding standard for school attendance. I don't know about you, but when I was in high school and I showed up for classes 12 hours a week, they did not call that regularly attending school. They called my mother. So great work incentive. If your family member is still a student, they're under age 22, and they're getting SSI, they absolutely should be trying out paid work. There is no downside to it. You can keep the full SSI benefit while they're working and earning up to $9,460 a year. Next slide, please. So, quick example. Here's a person who starts out with only SSI of $967 a month, starts working 10 hours a week in an after-school job, making $15 an hour, and they keep their full SSI. You can see that in blue in the second column, and their wages after taxes on top of that are supplementing their full SSI payment. SSI is not reduced at all. Next slide. What happens if a person is no longer a student, or if they're 22 years old or older? Then they no longer qualify for the student earned income exclusion, but there are some other work incentives they may be able to use. If they are paying for expenses needed because of a disability that are needed at least partly for work, they can use a work incentive called impairment-related work expenses, known as IRWEs for short. So that could be, for example, paying for medications, medical services, therapy, assistive technology, service animals, home modifications to be able to get in and out of the home, could be transportation needed because a person is unable to use standard public transportation or drive because of their disability. And the expenses don't have to be needed only for work. They could be expenses that a person would have to pay for whether or not they were working, like medical needs and assistive technology and attendant care, whatever. As long as they're needed at least partly for work, then they can be deducted from their work income. So what does that do? Remember the balance or scale or seesaw analogy. If they get to subtract those impairment-related work expenses from their earnings, then the portion of of their earnings that count against SSI goes down, and that means their SSI goes up. So they can keep more SSI to help offset those out-of-pocket expenses they're paying for work. If a person meets Social Security's definition of blindness, they can deduct almost all work-related expenses from their income, even if they have nothing to do with blindness or any other disability. And you may wonder, like my wife who's deaf wonders aloud and sometimes angrily, why do blind people get special treatment? And the best answer I can give you is they've got the best lobby, including the National Federation of the Blind, which is headquartered here in Maryland. But next slide, please. And a third work incentive that can enable a person to keep more SSI while working is called a Plan to Achieve Self-Support, or PASS for short. And this is a written agreement. There's a fairly lengthy form to fill out to get it approved that specifies a work goal a person wants to reach. Full-time employment in a particular job, or perhaps a business of a particular kind with a specific earnings goal. The PASS specifies the steps a person needs to go through to reach that goal, and very importantly, the expenses they need to pay for out of their own pocket to reach the goal. With the PASS, you get to subtract the expenses you have to pay for to reach your goal from your income, and that lets you keep more SSI, in many cases, the maximum SSI while working. The kinds of expenses can include training, education, tuition, books, fees, tutoring, etc. Can include uniforms, tools, equipment, childcare if needed to be able to work or complete training, transportation, even buying a car, computers, expenses to start a business, wide variety of things. And the PASS offsets those expenses with higher SSI payments and enabling the person to keep more SSI than they would get without the pass. And finally, next slide, please. We're going to get to my favorite work incentive in the SSI program. Are we able to move to the next slide?
Did we move or is it?
Is it frozen? I can
Margie?
wait if we're not
Margie
able.
lost her sound.
Oh, okay.
Here we go.
Oh, perfect.
Excellent. Thank you. We're saved. Okay. So this is my favorite work incentive. This is really a double safety net. Now think back to that first bar graph I showed you for Marshawn. And you saw that once Marshawn was working full time, his earnings were high enough that they reduced his SSI to 0. And you might have thought, well, I can see Marshawn's got more net income working full time, but he's getting no SSI. What happens to his Medicaid, his medical assistance? The reason he got it was he was receiving SSI payments. If his SSI checks stop, will his Medicaid stop? And you might also have wondered, what happens if the job doesn't work out? Marshawn stops working. His SSI stopped. Does he have to reapply and start all over to get it back? With this safety net, this double safety net, both of those fears are resolved. This third safety net is a rule called 1619B. That's just the section of the Social Security Act that created this rule. It is a double safety net. 1619B says, if your earnings from work rise high enough to reduce your SSI to 0, you still stay eligible for SSI. Well, what good is that if you're not getting SSI payments? It's good in two ways. Number one, you can keep your Medicaid, your medical assistance, even though your SSI payments have gone down to 0. And number two, if your earnings later drop low enough or you stop working completely for any reason, you can simply call Social Security and they will restart your SSI payments. You don't have to reapply. You don't have to wait months or years. You simply contact them, verify that your earnings have dropped low enough or stopped, and they'll reinstate the SSI payments, usually within a month to 2 months. So I love this work incentive because what it means is a person on SSI has nothing to lose working full time. Even if they earn enough to reduce their SSI to 0, they haven't severed their connection with SSI. They're still eligible for SSI. They can keep the medical assistance, the Medicaid, and go right back on SSI quickly and easily if something happens to their job later. Next slide. So to be eligible for 1619B, a person has to meet a few conditions. First, their SSI would have been reduced to 0 by their earnings from work. Generally, their earnings have to be less than an amount, a little over, you can see, a little over $57,000 a year. Most people on SSI don't reach earnings at that level for quite a while, if ever. In some cases, a person can be earning even significantly more than $57,000 a year and still be eligible for 1619B, particularly if they have high medical expenses covered by Medicaid. And if your family member is going to be getting services from DDA, the Developmental Disabilities Administration, they will likely have high expenses covered by Medicaid. The services they're getting from DDA would be counted as those expenses, and they could be earning significantly more than $57,000 a year and still be eligible for 1619B. They also have to remain otherwise eligible for SSI, have to keep their resources that count below the $2,000 limit, for example, and they, can't win the lottery or get some big pension or something else that could cause their SSI to stop. And they have to continue to need Medicaid. Just using it once a year meets that requirement. So it's pretty easy to remain eligible for 1619B. So what I hope you've gotten out of this is the awareness that once your family member has SSI, they absolutely should consider working and increasing their earnings, because they've got these safety nets that protect the benefits they need, that make sure they get ahead financially, they can keep their Medicaid, be able to go right back on SSI if anything happens to the job later. That 1619B is a fantastic work incentive. And if they're still in school and not yet 22 years old, they should absolutely try out paid work, because they can do it while they're a student under age 22 without having their SSI reduced at all. And I believe that's the last slide, and we can go ahead and move on to questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Dalto. That was terrific. We do have several questions here in the chat. I've written most of them out. So I will start. This one is a little bit lengthy, multiple parts. My understanding is that the SSI, SSDI student applicant will be asked to go for a medical examination appointment with the Social Security adjudicator. Number one, is that true? Can you provide any insight into that?
Okay. So that's part one, correct? To the question?
True.
Great. Okay. Yes. So I did want to tell you that if enough of you were interested in another presentation that focuses entirely on the SSI application process, or the SSI application process perhaps paired with the Social Security disability insurance, it's SSDI application process, I'd be happy to do that. I've done that before for PCR, but with only an hour, I really didn't have time to go into too much detail about that, but I'm happy to answer the question. So when a person applies for SSI or Social Security disability insurance, different cash benefit a person can get from Social Security based on having a disability, they have to meet certain medical criteria to be eligible. And Social Security will be looking not just at any earnings they're receiving to make sure they're not doing substantial work when they first apply. They're also going to be looking to see if they meet certain criteria medically. And when I say medically, I'm using the term medically perhaps more broadly than we might ordinarily. I'm not just talking about medical conditions. I'm talking about disabilities that could include psychological, intellectual developmental disabilities, behavioral health disabilities, etc. So Social Security does require that people have medical evidence that documents their disability, that their disability meets Social Security's standard. The best thing you can do to speed up your application for SSI or SSDI is to get medical records, school records like IEPs that verify your family member's disability. And if you ask Social Security if you need to do that, they'll say, oh, no, you don't have to do that. We're going to give you a form. You're going to sign it. That will give your consent to your doctors, your school, et cetera, to release records to Social Security. And that's true, but it always delays the process. If you can submit the records with the application or after you've initially applied, rather than waiting for doctors, psychologists, school staff to provide the records to Social Security, the application will go through more quickly. Now, if you're able to furnish enough of those records that Social Security can say, yes, we've got enough information here to make a decision, they will not require you to get another evaluation, another medical evaluation. However, if they feel they don't have enough evidence to make a decision, then they will send you to one of their doctors, one of their consulting doctors. There's several reasons why I don't like relying on that. One is it's potluck. You have no idea who that doctor might be, how competent or thorough they might be. Some of them have been known to spend 15 or 20 minutes with a person, which is not enough to get to know a person well enough to document their disability. If you're relying on records from healthcare providers, psychologists, et cetera, who have an established relationship with your family member, they know them better, they've spent more time with them, that's certainly preferable. Another reason is that I think there's at least the perception of a conflict of interest if you're being evaluated by a doctor who's being paid by Social Security to do that evaluation. And I think you can see where I'm going here. I'm not saying that these doctors are unethical, but there's the appearance of a conflict of interest if they're being paid to do an evaluation by an agency in whose financial interest it is to not approve everyone for benefits and spend more money as a result. So I think you get what I'm saying there. So that was the first part of the question, and then there was more, I understand.
Yeah, and we actually have several other questions in the chat as well.
Great.
So I will say that we in the school system, we encourage you to reach out to your transition support teacher to help you assemble as much of that documentation as possible. Certainly that IEP, the most recent psychological educational assessment, those types of things as well. Okay, the other parts to this, is the appointment strictly for the applicant, or do they also interview the parent? And what types of things are they looking for in this medical appointment?
I'd say it depends largely on the nature of the disability. If it's a intellectual developmental disability, then the consultative evaluator, the doctor hired by Social Security to do the evaluation, should be speaking with family or others who know the individual well. Oftentimes they won't. They might just spend a brief amount of time with the individual. It's another reason to try to get as many records as you can from current healthcare providers, school staff, school psychologist, et cetera. In addition to the medical records, I want to add that if the person with a disability has done any work, paid or unpaid, or both, if someone, the employer, a job coach, school staff, someone who's familiar with their work, can write a little narrative explaining how the person's disability limited their work activities, that could be helpful as well. Remember, the definition of disability for adults includes the fact that the person's disability limits their work activities. If the person has actually done work and somebody can document how their disability limited their work activities, that can be really helpful in getting an approval. Family members can write a narrative. There's a form called a disability report form that's part of the application process. It gives you the opportunity to detail how disability limits daily activities and work activities as well. And more questions?
Yes. Wasn't there discussion of raising the $2,000 asset limit for SSI recipients a while back? What happened to that?
That's a perennial bill that comes up before the Congress, and it never passes. There have been frequent attempts to raise the resource limit and to raise certain subtractions that are applied to earnings when a person or other income when a person's getting SSI, that would let a person have more income and still keep more SSI than they can now. They never pass. I think what Congress decided was when they passed the ABLE Act, the law that enabled states to create ABLE programs, they said, all right, now people can save $100,000 in an ABLE account and still be eligible for SSI. We don't need to raise the resource limit. So I really would not hold my breath about the asset limit being increased. It's, every handful of years, a new bill is introduced, it never passes.
Okay, what would child support in a divorce situation for an adult qualify as earned or unearned?
Okay, it's a great question. Child support counts as unearned income if the child is under age 18, then 2/3 of the child support amount is counted, not the whole amount. If the individual getting the support is 18 or older, the entire amount is counted. After they subtract the first $20, but other than that, the entire amount counts against the SSI. Now, if the divorce is amicable enough for the parents to reach a reasonable agreement, there are ways that child support can be paid that would reduce the impact on SSI. One way would be for the child support to be paid directly into an ABLE account. Doesn't count as income, can be up to $19,000 a year, and would not reduce the SSI at all. An alternative to that would be for the non-custodial parent who's paying child support, rather than providing cash child support, if they paid directly for expenses other than housing, clothing, education, transportation, et cetera, if they paid directly for those kinds of expenses rather than providing cash to pay for them, that would not reduce the SSI either. And next
Okay.
question.
So there are two additional ABLE questions. Can ABLE account be linked to the SSI account?
Money can be transferred from a person's checking or savings account that receives their SSI payment, can then money can be transferred from that account into the ABLE account. Yes.
Okay, if audited for SSI, is it okay to state that the funds were put into the ABLE account?
Yes, absolutely. Social Security's rule book has an entire section on ABLE accounts, and everything that I've told you is in there. It's entirely legal. I didn't pull out any stops that are really obscure or anything. These are readily available rules in Social Security's operations manual.
Okay, have you heard about people who have either qualified for SSDI or are earning over the limit for SSI and maintaining their SSI at 1 cent?
Well, the minimum SSI benefit is $1 a month. But there are definitely people who receive Social Security disability insurance, also known as SSDI for short. Incidentally, that's a cash benefit from Social Security that has the same disability requirement as SSI, but rather than being based on financial need, it's based on either the person with a disability or a parent having worked and paid Social Security taxes on their earnings long enough that they qualify for this benefit called SSDI. Now, if the SSDI benefit is less than $987 a month, then the person may qualify for at least a little bit of SSI as well. Again, the minimum is $1 a month. Now, that said, if a person's goal is, well, I want to keep at least $1 of SSI so that I can keep Medicaid, I can keep medical assistance, there is actually another way to keep medical assistance if a person gets too much SSDI to receive any SSI. This strays a little bit beyond the scope of this evening's presentation, but for someone who gets $987 a month or more of SSDI, does not qualify for any SSI, they can get medical assistance, Medicaid, if they are working for pay, earning even a very minimal amount. I've known people earning less than $50 a month from paid work who qualified for this program, and it's called Employed Individuals with Disabilities, or EID for short. And it's just for people with disabilities who are working, meet a few other conditions, and the benefit it provides is Medicaid, medical assistance. So you don't have to be getting SSI in order to get medical assistance. There are other ways to get it, and the EID program is a great way.
Okay, so we are actually out of time. So what I can do is, Patricia, if you can send me any of the questions that we didn't get to, and then Michael, I can be in touch with you about answering some of them, but we definitely want to get you on that offer about coming back and talking about filling out the application. And so I'll be in touch with you so we can get a date scheduled for that in the future. So thank you so much, Michael.